Hi, everybody. See some familiar names in the participant list. Nice to see you all. I will do a full introduction in just a few minutes, but my name is Alexa. I'll be hosting this national kickoff event for Game On today. We are going to give people just a few minutes, or actually less than a few minutes, to come into the event, make sure they can see and hear everything. While we wait just a few seconds, I'm very curious where everybody is zooming in from, and if you are an actual soccer fan or just a hosting fan or both. Let's see what people say. Dave, a real soccer fan. Love it. Hi, Peter from Seattle. All right, I see some other folks typing, so we'll give them a chance. All right, while folks still come on into the event, I'm going to kick us off here. My name's Alexa. I am one of the co-founders of Rent Responsibly. That's my co-founder, Dave, who's in the chat and in that photo there. Rent Responsibly is a community and education platform for short-term rental hosts of all kinds. So whether you are brand new for the World Cup or you've been doing this for a while, welcome. This is where you should be. This is the perfect place to learn everything you're going to need for getting ready for the World Cup and beyond. Here's what we're going to cover today. This is really like a part one of a series of events. We're going to cover today a lot of the things that we as hosts need to be looking into right now, making sure we're getting right now, so that we're heading off any potentially big problems and issues that could make all the next few months of work and prep and the actual hosting around the World Cup, go to waste if we let big problems happen. So we are going to talk through insurance and making sure you are fully covered, making sure your policy gives you exactly what you need. There's no hidden gap. Nick Massey at Proper Insurance is going to take us through that. And then we're going to head over to Humphrey Bowles with Truvi. We're going to talk through some heavy stuff, but important stuff like high-risk guests, how to spot them, what to do about them when you see warning signs of things like parties or even trafficking, which is an unfortunate reality around big events like this. And then Max from Avalara is going to talk us through STR taxes. Every place is a little bit different. It's a patchwork of tax rules. Sometimes Vrbo and Airbnb collect them, sometimes they don't. It's kind of all over the place. So Max is going to talk to us about how to make sure we are calculating everything properly, so that by the time we're done with the World Cup, we're not left with a big surprise tax bill. Then Paul Seago at Expedia Group is going to talk to us about all the other rules and regulations. Again, they're all a little bit different all over the place. They can be hard to find, hard to navigate. So he's going to give us a primer on that. And then I'm going to take us out with a playbook for sports tourism. So sports tourism is on the rise. It is a great group of travelers to cater to. We have an awesome opportunity coming up with the World Cup, but then there's all sorts of other sports that happen in many of our host cities as well. So I will talk a lot about that and how to use that information to your benefit. Throughout today, chat is open. I see some folks using it already. If you haven't yet, open up chat. Feel free to talk to each other, to our speakers. We will answer some questions live today during this event. If we can't get to your question, we will make sure all the right people at all of these wonderful partner companies get your questions and can reach back out to you for help. All right, with that, I'm going to throw it over to my friend Nick at Proper Insurance to talk to us about the coverage we really need.
Awesome. Thanks, Alexa. Happy to be here as always. I trust everybody can now see my screen. I am not a soccer fan, as some of you may find that unfortunate, and nor am I anywhere near where the World Cup is going to be. So coming to you from Bozeman, Montana, we have plenty to do here. Professional sports is not one of them. But what we're going to dive into I'm going to go through these really quick. I want to hopefully leave some time for questions. Is just really what do we need to be looking at, whether we're a property manager and we're consulting with our homeowners, or we're an individual host, and kind of what's going on out there, what we need to be looking for in insurance protection. And I'm really excited to go first, and then also be followed up by Humphrey with Truvi, so we can really get a good encapsulation of this risk management strategies right away. So I kind of start anecdotally with why short-term rental coverage matters. The fundamental basis of it is the standard retail insurance markets simply do not want to pay claims for vacation rentals. It's just the fact. So it should be known that the number one risk out there is driving your car. You're required to have insurance for your vehicle, and the question is why? Why am I required to have insurance on my car? It's not because you're a bad driver. It's because they're concerned about everyone else around you, right? It's concerns of you're going to hit somebody, you're going to ruin somebody's life, and you need to have insurance to financially protect them from that. Owning a short-term rental is fairly hazardous from a liability standpoint as well. And so if you own a vacation rental, it truly is probably your second most or biggest liability exposure that you have in your day-to-day life. So the homeowner, landlord, and booking platform coverage, if you will, isn't short-term rental insurance. The OTAs even say this, if you really do the deep dive on their websites, that this does not replace your standard policy, and you need to make sure you're getting your right stuff. So what's our ultimate goal here? The goal is protect the income. If something goes wrong, you got to cancel bookings, protect your guests from liability, and protect the assets when they're shut down so they can get repaired. So I'm going to start with the common one out there. It's homeowners insurance with an endorsement. So this is very common. A lot of carriers provide this slap-on endorsement that does cover vacation rentals. They're primarily built for a primary home. So if you think your single-family house with the in-law suite, that's where these can come in and more or less patch this leaky raft. It allows you to short-term rent. It remodifies the business activity exclusion. Problem is that they're not very comprehensive. They can cap the number of nights. They can cap your actual property protection. The most common one out there is $2,500 in damage. They have very weak income protection in the way of what's called loss of rents, which is a fair market value for long-term rentals, not the actual income made by the property. And they typically exclude things in the liability coverage like liquor exclusion, so people drinking on the property and becoming injured, amenities like hot tubs. They can exclude pools, bicycles, canoes, kayaks, you name it, and then varying levels of guest injury. Yeah, sure, they'll cover the slip and fall accident, but stuff outside of that, they're usually fairly weak in coverage. So that's one option. The other option is second homes, is traditional landlord policy, or DP3 is what they're called. They're traditionally written for long-term tenants, but you can get, again, a short-term rental enhancement put on this. If you don't have that enhancement, you still maintain a business activity exclusion that can deny virtually any claim. Guest damage is not the same as vandalism. They do cover vandalism, but not damage via property entrustment. So when you hand that key over to a guest, you've now entrusted them with care and control of your property during the duration of their stay, and that is going to cause problems if there's guest-caused damage. Loss of rents is not STR income. So like I said previously, they typically cover fair market value. What is the fair market rental value of a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom, 2-bath in your community? It does not equate to the same of what you're generating during this particular event with the World Cup. You're going to be able to drive and garner higher rates for this. And so you really want to make sure your income is covered correctly if something goes wrong. They limit liability to premises only. So they're going to cover more things than the home sharing endorsement on the liability. But as soon as that guest vacates your property line, there's no more coverage for liability to protect you if they decide to name you in a lawsuit, unfortunately. Whoops. There we go. So there's a coverage gap, right? We have 3 types of policies that we can get. The first and most common is the HO3, homeowner's policy built for a primary residence. It excludes business activity, doesn't have guest coverage. You're going to have to endorse it, but it's still very limited. You have the landlord policy, built for second homes, again, can be endorsed for short-term rentals. It does have limitations, so that's stuff we need to look at, and we'll go through in a further slide here. Commercial policies. Now, commercial policies don't have business activity exclusions. Real quick, what is a business activity exclusion? If you make more than $2,500 a year through active advertising of a business at your property, short-term rentals fall into that category. The commercial liability protection will extend off premises, which is great because our guests don't live on site 24/7 when they stay at our home. So that's a nice upgrade. It also extends to protect the real estate manager automatically. So as a property manager, your contract probably specifies they need to have some type of insurance on the home, name you on the product as an additional insured. A commercial policy generally does that automatically. So it helps kind of alleviate that particular worry from the property manager side when your client carries this type of coverage. But not every commercial policy in this space is built the same. There's only a couple of us, Proper being one. There's a few others that fall into this type of coverage product. They could have liquor and animal liability exclusions. So again, drinking on site, gifted bottles of wine, left behind liquor, no coverage. If you're a pet-friendly property and the travelers bring a dog and that dog bites somebody, no coverage. So these are things to be on the lookout for. Assault and battery. I know it's not a fun one to talk about, but again, intoxicated guests get into an altercation with somebody and that someone names you in a lawsuit. A lot of times they have limitations or straight up exclusions around that, where you're left footing that bill yourself. Personal and advertising injury, think of this more or less invasion of privacy. Miscommunication with the cleaning team. There's a late checkout. They show up to clean. Folks are still in the property and they decide to sue you for invasion of privacy. That's the type of coverage you get on commercial through personal and advertising. They can have theft limits or even vacancy limits. So if a property goes on vacant for a period of time, then you have reduced coverage for things like water damage, theft, fire, wind, on and on and on. And then they almost always have a sewer backup limitation or may have some wonky language around damage caused by a guest. So these are all things to really be investigating and asking the right questions. So in theory, short-term rentals need all three of these built into one. So your occupancy is going to vary from short to mid to long to vacant or even owner occupied. There's so many unknown variables that can happen during a guest stay: slip and fall accidents, parties, frozen water. I mean, hand up accountability for me. I was in a rush Monday morning and I fell down my own stairs in my house. And if you could see it, this entire arm is like bruised up and battered. Yeah, I'm clumsy, but it doesn't mean if that happens to a guest, they don't turn around and want to sue you because you have too much lacquer on the stairs or something like that. So you need all three of these combined, and there's more than one carrier that does this. Again, yes, Proper is one of these. There's other companies out in this space that are going to be giving either this level or some type of variation of all of these coverages here. Commercial general liability is the strongest for our market. You want all risk coverage on property and contents. What that means is, it doesn't mean everything is covered. It just means the most amount of things are covered on all risk type policies. And then loss of business revenue, because it is fundamentally a different calculation than loss of rent or fair market value. So those are key terms to be thinking about when you're reviewing insurance policy for the individual asset. And then, do you have property entrustment coverage, meaning a guest accidentally, maliciously, or intentionally damages property? Do you have coverage and how much? Pet and animal liability, whether you're pet friendly or not, this is definitely something to check out because people sneak dogs into properties. We had 3 pigs as emotional support animals at a property and they cause all sorts of ruckus. Bed bug and flea protection, again, fleas for the pets that show up. Bed bugs, you never know who can bring what from where. It takes one stuffed animal, one pillowcase, one article of clothing that has bed bugs in it to cause a shutdown of your property. What about squatters? These folks stay longer than their allotted duration, try to claim tenants' rights, squat at your property. How are you protected for legal expense and lost business revenue? Are you covered for your amenities on and off property for guest use? And then liquor liability. Again, people drink on vacation. I know it's a crazy thought, but you want to make sure you're protected for that. So here's some questions to ask insurance agents if you're not fully understanding reading your insurance contract. Is guest cause damage covered and how much? Do I have lost business income, not just loss of use or loss of rent? Is my liability covered when the guest vacates the premises? What about pets, liquor, amenities? What about water damage limitations or any special deductibles for certain losses? This can catch people off guard when they have a water damage claim of $50,000, let's say, but they're only covered up to $20,000 as a sublimit on the policy. That's $30,000 net out of your own pocket, out of your revenue stream, for not, knowing how much you're actually covered on the water damage side. And very important, always get written confirmation, because if an agent or a carrier tells you something in writing and that doesn't happen to be true at the time of a claim, you have supporting evidence in which they're going to have to honor that. So very important to get it in writing. Now, the other component to this is something called damage waivers. So this has become increasingly popular over the years. It is something you're in control of. So you partner with a damage waiver company. There's a number of them. You have Safely, you have Rental Guardian, you have Wavo, which is a company we partner with. I'm pretty sure Truvi's still doing it. I'm not 100% sure, but there's a number of them out there to do this. So not relying on the OTA provided protection, because you have zero control over what their decision is going to be. They generally provide a much broader scope of coverage for these smaller damages. They're built and meant to do the small things, the broken table, the broken lamp, things that are sub-deductible, less than 1,000, less than 2,500, maybe even less than 5,000. And the cost is rolled up into the booking fees in most cases. So it does not translate into an expense for you, the business. It is built into the platform and the booking charge that you're charging the guest, in lieu of doing a security deposit, avoiding chargebacks, avoiding guest disputes, and things of that nature. So they're built. If you do this, you don't need a security deposit anymore. You have the damage waiver product. It's going to cover accidental guest damage for sure. Some of these damage waiver supplements do cover intentional and malicious damage by a guest as well. They reduce that communication chain with security deposits on placing blame on who damaged what and whose credit card you're pulling the money from. And then also claim friction, because they move and work very fast, having that broader scope of protection for you. You can do host paid, you can split it. Most folks do them as guest add-on. To give you an idea of cost, this is directly from Wavo, just because they're a partner company of ours. So for a $1,500 damage waiver, you're looking at a $39 minimum fee up to 10 nights. And then you would pay an additional $3.90 after that. 3,000, 5,000. This is the rating for an individual host. As a property manager, they have an enterprise model. They go to some higher limits. They do a little different price structuring. But the beauty is that there's no minimum requirements here. If you have one property, great, you qualify, you can get it. If you have 200 properties, good for you, you fall under the enterprise model. There's not a minimum limit here. So the end-to-end protection, proper insurance plays in this home liability and property protection standpoint. You have another partner of ours, Wister. They are for the actual property manager. So if you're a property manager on this call and you're like, I need to think about my insurance, that's a good place, a good resource to start. And then Wavo with the guest damage. Again, I have them up here because they're partner company of ours. And they specialize solely in vacation rentals. So great point to go and look. If you're interested in learning more about Proper, what we do, how we can maybe work with you to give you more information versus just this very short spattering that we had time for, please reach out to us. Our team is here and dedicated, ready to answer the phone and address and answer any and all of your questions.
Thanks, Nick. You made me really stressed out about my homeowner's policy. I'm going to take that list and go ask some questions. You're very good. All right, we've got a minute for questions from the audience. I'm really curious We usually get a few really good, interesting ones. Let's see. Anybody have any insurance questions?
Knocked it out of the park, I guess.
You did.
Yeah,
What
got
would you
through it.
say is the number one thing people should be thinking about for the World Cup specifically?
It's going to be guest damage
Guess
for
damage.
sure. Guest
Yeah.
damage and alcohol,
Okay.
without a doubt. I'm curious to see specifically our uptick in bed bug claims through this event. Just because you got travelers from all over the world, and you just never know. And it's going to be it's going to be an interesting, to see kind of what comes of this. I mean, best
Mhm.
case scenario, nothing happens, but laws of probability, that's not going to be the case. So,
Right.
but guest damage and liquor related liability, I think is going to be one of the more common things that we're going to run into.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. And yeah, there are some cities with like major bed bug outbreaks right now. I don't remember which ones. I probably should have looked that up before this, but that's my personal nightmare. No, thank you to that as a guest or a homeowner.
Yeah.
All right, Nick, we can set you free to go catch your flight. If
So
anybody here
we
is
do this in
in,
Vermont.
I know I was about to say, yeah, if anybody here is in or near Vermont, you'll catch Nick at the Vermont STRA conference, which will be awesome. I'm jealous you get to go.
Yeah.
Thanks,
All right.
Nick.
Well, thank you very much. I'll let Humphrey take it from here.
Yeah.
All
All
right. Bye,
right.
everybody.
Welcome, Humphrey. I'm going to throw it over to you. Humphrey's going to talk to us about red flags and things we want to be watching out for our guests, especially during an event like the World Cup. Humphrey, take it away.
Thanks, Alexa, and thanks, Nick. So guys, I'm gonna be trying to subject myself to some public humiliation, because I'm actually going to be asking you to interact with me on the chat, if that's okay, as we go through things. And just to kick off, I wanted to ask everyone, yes or no, have you ever had a booking where something felt slightly off before check-in? You couldn't name it, just a feeling. Can you just put a quick yes or no into the chat? Okay, so I'm seeing yeses coming through here, okay, which is really helpful. Um, so every single booking is a high stakes decision. And I'm pretty sure you picked up from Nick that every booking has risk. And ultimately you're letting a stranger into a property that you were legally and financially responsible for. And I need to ask you what you're basing that decision on. Is it a profile photo? Is it a star rating? Is it a badge that says verified? And you're probably making that call in seconds. And here's the part that should really give you pause. I expect that the platform helping you to make that decision profits from completed bookings, not safe ones. And their incentive is to get you to yes, yours is to get it right. And the straight whiskey is that those are not the same thing. So, what does verified actually mean? So usually, and based on my experience hosting, it's normally an email address checked at sign up, sometimes an ID uploaded once, probably quite a few years ago, that the guest can then go on to update to anything they want without the platform notifying you. I don't know if you've actually ever gone on to your Airbnb account and changed your profile name and then sent some messages through. The replies come back with the update rather than actually who you actually are. Now, let's be clear. The verified badge tells you that someone or something does exist. but it does not tell you who's actually arriving at your property tonight. Now, that's not a criticism of the platforms. It's just the reality of how their verification works. And if you're making risk decisions based on that badge, you're working with a hell of a lot less information than you think. So, if you're game, I'd love you to drop into the chat what your current guest screening process looks like. Is it platform verification only, or do you do something on top of that? Anyone going to give me anything to work with here? Do most people just rely on platform verification? Okay, so let's look at. Okay, that's helpful, Peter. Thank you. If you're suspicious, you trade emails. That's helpful. And I appreciate you participating. I'm going to come again, people, so please be prepared. So hotels have got a front desk. They've also got pretty trained staff, although you wouldn't believe that at some of the Premier Inns I've stayed in. They've also got a fairly continuous human presence, and every guest is seen, every interaction is observed by security cameras. You have an automated check-in and a cleaner who arrives after the guest is long gone and has left before they've even arrived. Whatever was going to happen has already happened by the time your first human contact occurs. And that might be 2 days after check-in, and it might be not at all. Now, that's not a flaw in your operation. It's the model, but it has a direct implication. Your screening has to work harder before a guest arrives, precisely because you won't be there when they do. Now, I think that we've already seen from chatting with Nick or hearing Nick, like, what are your biggest guest risk concerns for the World Cup? And it's property damage, it's parties, it's noise, or even something more serious. Now, I like that is exactly what I expected to hear. And I think all of us think about damage and parties when this comes to mind. And that's real and it's worth managing. But I also wanted just to talk about something more serious and something that really does deserve more of your attention than it's getting. The same booking channels, the same properties, the same gaps in verification that let in nuisance guests can let in something far, far more serious. And short-term rentals have been used for sex trafficking and will continue to be used for sex trafficking until we collectively as an industry take actual steps in order to prevent it. And this happens in ordinary properties on quiet streets, but through the same platforms you use every day. And the risk spectrum is way wider than most operators realize. So let's talk about the warning signs. And I think there are really two sets: what you can see before arrival and what people on the ground observe during a stay. So, before arrival, you're looking for two things that don't add up: disposable contact details, burner phone numbers, temporary email addresses, if you can spot those, Peter. Booking patterns that don't make sense. This can be, for example, last minute, a local address on a leisure booking, vague or evasive answers about the purpose of the stay, pushback on house rules before they've even checked in, a profile created last week, if you can see it, a name that doesn't match the ID, and no booking history anywhere. Now, none of these individually is a verdict, but they're signals. And unfortunately, most property managers aren't looking for them and don't have time to look for them actively on every single booking. So while I keep on talking, a genuine question for this chat: has anyone here ever declined a booking based on their gut feeling that I asked them at the start? And if so, what was the red flag that pushed you over the edge? Now, whilst you're tapping that in, I want to tell you about a what happened during a stay in Texas. It was on a quiet suburban road, totally ordinary short-term rental, and a neighbor noticed people coming and going as unusual as not loud, not disruptive, just frequent. The patterns didn't fit, and she called it in. Now, law enforcement went in, and 12 people were prosecuted for human trafficking following this call in. The signs were pretty visible. Someone just knew what to look for, and crucially, she knew what to do with that feeling. So, what are those signs on the ground? Well, it's frequent visitors at odd hours. It's guests with no luggage or who don't appear to be in control. Someone who seems frightened or who defers to another person in the group for every answer. Suspicious payments or transactions. Now, these aren't things a screening tool catches. They're things people notice. The question is whether the people going into your properties know what to do when they notice them. Which brings me on to the most important slide in this deck. Knowing what to look for is only half of it. You also need a process for what happens next. There are 3 moments where that process matters. Before arrival, if something doesn't add up, verify what you can. Cross-reference against watch lists. And if the picture still doesn't stack up, please decline. That option exists, and I really encourage people to use it more. During a stay, if what your cleaner, your co-host, you as a property manager, or your property manager themselves observes looks like a welfare concern rather than a property issue, that is not a resolutions call. Do not intervene directly. Contact the relevant authorities, and in the US, it's the National Human Trafficking Hotline. I will drop the number into the chat following this call, this chat. Um, I'm I'm going to guess that the chat is pretty quiet right now. Um, that's the gap. Make sure that you take this number down and make sure that everyone who kind of works and uses around your properties knows it. And then after a stay, report incidents through your screening provider. Patterns across bookings are intelligence, and every flag raised makes the picture clearer for you and the operators who come after you. Now, your gut feeling is real. It My Zoom went. So look, I think where I think you lost me was that for those of you running the serious operations, when your screening is Airbnb's verification, you can't see what was checked. You don't know why. You're given very limited information. And when something goes wrong, you find out very quickly how little control you've actually got. Now, risk management is a business function. The operators building resilient businesses are treating it that way, owning the data, understanding the patterns, and improving the process over time, not outsourcing it to a platform whose incentives just don't align with yours. So I'm very happy to to answer some questions. I've got a number I'm going to drop into the chat. Forgive me for dropping off, and yeah, please let me know if anyone's got anything they'd like me to answer.
Yeah, there was a question earlier from Valerie. Can you recommend an awareness training? It's a great question.
That is a great training. Do you know what? I'm gonna be very 2026, Valerie. I'm going to suggest you go onto AI and you type in to the AI who you are, what you do, and say, I'm concerned about this. How can you get more informed? And not only is that free, but it will give you a really great foundation in how you can help yourself and what you can do.
That's a great tip. I know there's also some states in the US. Don't quote me on this, but I don't think any of them are states where a host city is, but they are also requiring and providing awareness training as a part of getting a short-term rental permit. So there's a few of those out there. What we can do is we can go round those up as well and share them with everybody. All right. Any other questions? I don't see any. But thank you, Humphrey. That was incredibly helpful. We do have some guides on our on the Game On website. We'll drop a link, including how and where you can use external security cameras to help with some of this issue spotting or watching out for those red flags. So we do have some helpful stuff we can drop to you now, and then we'll round up some more resources shortly after the event. But
Thanks,
Humphrey,
Dexter. Can
yeah,
I
thank
can
you
I
so much. Yeah.
can I just answer Peter's question because I think it's a really good one.
Yep.
So, so
Sorry, I did not see it.
Peter, no, I don't think World Cup fans are, but they will be used as cover for people who want to move people.
Mm.
So, and knowing whether they're a legitimate fan or not will be quite difficult to identify. Okay, thanks, guys. Lovely to see you.
Thanks, Humphrey. Appreciate it. Okay, up next, we have Max Fountain here to talk to us about taxes. Please tell me there's good news. Please tell me there's good stuff amongst the tax world for us, Max.
I would love to say that, but unfortunately, Uncle Sam loves to get his money and he likes to, as you can tell everyone here, I am a soccer fan. So I
Mhm.
have to toss out, they want to goal keep, some of your revenue, right? They want to catch some of
Mhm.
it. And in order to get some of the tax money and that kind of stuff, I always say though, tax money in general, the money that you pay, it goes to funding your local areas, the roads, the tourism, the everything else that brings your people in, as well as the different events, kind of like the World Cup. So as much as we all hate them, in the end, it's a unfortunate necessity, is what I always say.
Very true.
Well, I will go ahead and share my screen here to make sure everyone can see it. Awesome. There we go. So I will jump right into it. Thanks for joining us today. Very much appreciate you guys. I'm Max Fountain. As Alexa said, I am with Avalara. And today we're going to be talking about some of the key compliance related actions to take before you host for the World Cup coming up and how you can move forward with a better understanding of the state and local jurisdictions and rules that apply. We're going to be doing a little bit of a crash course on what is lodging tax, how it works, but a little bit about kind of who is Avalara in this weird, funky little name, and who's this guy wearing bright orange. For those who may not be familiar with us, we help property managers as well as hosts anywhere from one to thousands of properties to understand and manage lodging tax. As well as any jurisdictional compliance, licenses, tax accounts, all that other stuff. So we are going to really kind of make it simple, kind of understand what requirements are. Like I said, do a little crash course on what it is, and then kind of make it a little simpler to kind of understand what you might need before you rent for the World Cup. So you're prepared, you understand. And then at the end, we're actually going to provide a checklist as well that's going to kind of give you a quick rundown list on what you might need to do in terms of compliance before you start renting the property. Because as demand jumps and we start seeing a bunch of people come into the area, these jurisdictions know that there's money there and they want to make sure that everyone's following the right precautions. So we'll quickly kind of jump in here. I'll define what is lodging tax. So lodging tax in general, this is separate from your income tax that you pay to the state and IRS every single year. This is typically a monthly or a quarterly tax that's paid, basically what we call is like a pass-through tax. Your guest pays this tax when they book your property. And then in some of the cases, the taxes get passed over to you. And then it's your responsibility to then pass them back over to the jurisdiction, your state, county, city, that kind of stuff. Now, big thing to keep in mind here is that the tax changes everywhere across the US, and it can be completely different from your neighbor right across the street. So there's multiple different tax types, state, county, city. There's even what we call special taxing jurisdictions. So that's why I say you might have someone who lives across the street who falls into a different tax jurisdiction. There's multiple distribution channels. You might be listing on your own website, Airbnb, VRBO, that have different collection and marketplace rules. There's frequent changes. I mean, there was one jurisdiction early this year that changed the tax rate on the 15th of the month, just mid-month out of nowhere. And everyone had to kind of scramble and figure out, how do I pay this? So it happens all the time. And then same thing with new licenses, tax accounts, all that other kind of stuff. And like I said, as there is increased if people coming in, there's going to be a lot more audits and people kind of keeping an eye on jurisdictions within the host cities all throughout it. So not trying to scare you, but we'll jump into a little bit on what is it. So the first kind of step to kind of figuring out how you need to kind of approach this is one, even what's it called? So we kind of give a general broad term of lodging tax as that tax that I kind of chatted about earlier. But every jurisdiction has their own name for it. So you can kind of see some examples there on the screen. Florida, my home state, calls it Tourist Development Tax, or TDT. Texas calls it HOT, or Hotel Occupancy Tax. Arizona calls it TPT, or Transaction Privilege Taxes. I hope you're enjoying all the fun acronyms here. But all the different jurisdictions call it something different. And so the big thing is you'd first want to determine is, what is even the tax called in my applicable state, county, city? Because if you pick up the phone and you call Florida and say, hey, I'm looking to pay some bed tax, how do I do that? They're going to say, what is bed tax? And so you don't want to get into that conundrum. You want to kind of first figure out what that is called to understand the specific jurisdiction's tax terminology so that you can then move on and actually get your questions answered. Now, taxability across the US isn't uniform. So all over the US, they have different definitions of what is considered a short-term rental. So as you can see in the dark blue, the majority of states inside of the US considers a short-term rental as a stay that's anything less than 30 days. If it exceeds more than 30 days, at that point, it's considered what's a long-term rental. You're actually exempt from any of the lodging taxes that may apply to it. So you wouldn't have to technically file those to the state or county. Now, as you can see, there's other states in there that are less than 90 days, like Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina. And then you have Alabama there, who is anywhere less than 180 days. Now, you can see there's some there in gray that they're other. Florida, my state, because I always love to use them as a fun example, they consider a short-term rental as anything less than 182 days. So anything that is below that, essentially a little bit over 6 months, is considered a short-term stay and is applicable to lodging taxes, meaning that you need to be paying those taxes that your guest books. So understanding what is even the definition of a short-term rental inside of your jurisdiction is super important as well. So as we kind of talk about what is applicable and what may not be, we'll kind of jump into a little bit about the confusion of marketplace remittance. Now, marketplace I'm using as a term for Airbnb, VRBO, your own booking site, anything along those lines. So we're going to kind of talk about how it can be a little complex. So in this specific example, Miami Beach, which is right next to one of the host cities, Miami, not too terribly far from me. In this particular jurisdiction, they have 4 different levels of tax. You have the state, you have the county, and you have the city that are all requiring taxes to be remitted to them on a monthly basis inside of the state of Florida. Now, if you are renting the property direct, either to a friend, a family member, or to someone random through your own website, or they just, it's someone repeat visiting and they reached out to you, you would need to pay all 14% of this tax to all of the applicable jurisdictions. Now, the one thing I always love to toss out here is one of them that Florida loves to always trip people up in is they see the Miami-Dade sales surtax. That is actually filed to the state and not to the county, as much as you would think sales surtax, Miami-Dade, that's got to go to Miami-Dade, right? No. So even sometimes just even knowing the names can be a little confusing. But in this particular case, you file everything. Now, let's look at an example of if you were renting through Airbnb. Now, in this particular jurisdiction, Airbnb is filing a portion of the taxes, but there is a small percentage that is filed to the state, or excuse me, to the city on a monthly basis that needs to be filed to Miami Beach. That remaining 4%, so you can see everything above there is filed by Airbnb. So meaning that if you're exclusively renting through Airbnb, you may think Airbnb is filing everything for me. This is super easy. I don't have to worry about it. Wrong in this particular example. You always want to ensure by either checking with Airbnb, you can check with us. We offer free advice or anything along those lines, not tax advice, but free tax rate lookups, anything along those lines, where you could reach out to us and we could provide you with that information just to verify whether in your particular area, Airbnb or in VRBO are filing everything. But it's a big spot where a lot of people make mistakes, assuming that Airbnb files everything. And let me tell you, Miami Beach is one of the very few that if you aren't renting properly, they will knock on your door. And the first penalty of not paying taxes or not being compliant is $10,000 per day. It gets really, really expensive there. But let's say, okay, Max, I understand all about taxes now. It sounds like you guys are probably tax experts at this point, right? So we'll jump forward and be like, okay, Max, this sounds wonderful, but where do I even get started? I understand what my taxes are now. I understand taxability in my particular state, what's considered a short-term rental. Well, now when you start going to apply for the needed licenses or tax accounts, there's an order of operations that we always recommend that you follow, because each one of these particular jurisdictions, the county is going to require items from the state in order to verify that you're actually registered and you are set up with the state. And then the city is going to do the same thing, is going to want to make sure that you're registered with the county and with the state. So first thing, you're always going to want to start with registering with the applicable state for any tax accounts or licenses that may be applicable with the state. Once you've gotten that, you then want to register with the county. Check if there are any tax accounts that are required for the county, any short-term rental permits, anything along those lines. Then once you've gotten that set up, you then go for the city. Double check to see if there's any items for the city. What I always say is most jurisdictions always want you to be compliant, and they will help you with being compliant. So if you're like, I don't want to talk to Max, he seems like a weird guy, always pick up the phone and talk to the jurisdiction and say, hey, I have a new short-term rental that I'm going to be doing. How would I go about being compliant? And they can walk you through the needed steps, maybe explain what phone number you should call to the state, to the county, city, that kind of stuff in order to make sure you get the information that you need to rent correctly. And a lot of jurisdictions for short-term rental permits, you're going to require an inspection. So you need to get the inspection done and then get the approval and then list the property. Making sure that you have the proper permits and tax accounts in place before you even start renting the property is super important because you don't want to get behind on taxes. Now, last little thing I'll kind of toss out here is you may think, great, Max, I know this all sounds wonderful, but I don't know if that's really super, super important. Well, like I said, big thing to kind of keep in mind is more and more of these jurisdictions are starting to utilize stuff like AI. So Humphrey pointed out the 2026 method, even jurisdictions are getting into it. They're utilizing AI to scrape Airbnb and VRBO to find listings that aren't in compliance. And that is super, super important to make sure you're ahead of the game. Because if they find out that you're not renting your property or that you're renting your property and you've posted it before you've even gotten the applicable licenses and tax accounts and stuff, they are more willing to knock on your door and push enforcement than they are willing to have just a brief conversation on how it works. I know Houston recently, so Alexa kind of pointed out, they have a human trafficking course that is now required as a part of their permit. And they actually even require a listing number, or excuse me, the license number to be included in the listing for marketplaces. And if these people aren't compliant, they're requiring marketplaces like Airbnb and VRBO to take down these listings that aren't compliant with the short-term rental regulations that are done in Houston. So, and like I said, a lot of these jurisdictions are enforcing big fines, big penalties. And like I said, as the attendance increases and as everyone knows that there's money flooding into these jurisdictions and there's going to be short-term rentals that aren't going to be compliant, increased audit activity and increased checks by these jurisdictions is going to become really, really big. So I will walk you through here really quickly. What is the steps that we follow at Avalara My Lodge Tax every single day with any customer that signs up with our service? This is what we call the 5 steps to short-term rental compliance. The first step that we always recommend, research your applicable rates and regulations and registration requirements that are going to be needed for your property. Kind of make sure that you're set up, research everything, utilize stuff like AI. But big thing I'm going to tell a lot of people is don't always trust AI. We always know that AI loves to just provide a bunch of information, but it may not be 100% accurate. So double check it either with the jurisdiction by going to their city sites, maybe even asking AI to provide you with sources. I always make sure to do that with it to make sure that I'm double checking what it's saying is accurate. Then step number 2 is you're going to submit those applications, kind of what we're talking about. Apply with the state, apply with the county, apply with the city. Once you've gotten all those items together, at that point, it's making sure that you are ensuring every single month that you're calculating the right tax amounts that are owed and submitting those to the applicable jurisdictions there in step 4, submitting the needed returns at the needed frequencies, making sure that everything is set up so you're not overpaying or underpaying, and what is Airbnb filing for me and that kind of stuff. And then last step, I always say there's jurisdiction at the jurisdictions, there's people that work at them. So humans make mistakes. So at times you may get a notice. You may get them saying, hey, your property's not registered while you actually do have a permit. It happens all the time. That's where I always say communications with jurisdictions is extremely important. Whether that's once you get a notice, immediately reach out to them and say, hey, I actually have proof that I filed this. Can I send that over to you? And that usually clears out a delinquency. Like I said, people at these jurisdictions are people. Humans make mistakes. So at times notices may come up. Don't panic. Don't freak out. Just immediately reach out to them and work with them to resolve the issue. The longer that you go not resolving it, the more issues and problems you're going to have. Well, the last thing I want to leave you here is just tools and resources. So like I said, we have a compliance checklist that my colleague Shelly will be dropping inside of the chat that you can kind of utilize. It's got to go through what you're needed. Inside of it as well, we have a free tax rate lookup tool that makes it a little bit easier to kind of understand your tax rate. Now, the big thing I'm going to toss out, it's used for mainly guidance purposes only. So make sure to not trust it completely because there's different factors that go into determining a tax rate in some jurisdictions rather than just an address. So if you have any questions, you're wanting a tax rate, give us a call. We're happy to help you out and see what we can do to help you out. We also have free resources all along our website. I'll drop here a QR code that if you want to scan it, or you can go directly to our website and you can reach out to us. I promise, me and my 5 colleagues on the team, we only bite occasionally. It's not super, super often, but feel free to give us a ring. Feel free to shoot us an email and we're happy to help. We assist with last year alone over 11,000 customers. We submitted over 500,000 returns and renewed and applied for over 40,000 licenses. So this is what we do. We specialize in lodging tax. This is what I eat and breathe. I'm a tax nerd. So feel free to reach out and we are happy to help and make it a little bit easier for you. As I understand compliance, especially leading up to the big game here, you don't want it to be your big game, you know? Was that good? I don't know. That pun felt a little rough. I'm not going to lie to you.
That's all right. That's all right.
Okay. All right.
All right. I see lots of links being dropped in the chat. Does anybody have any questions on tax stuff? It is quite complex. I will say, highly recommend Avalara's lookup tool. That's my go-to when I need to figure out tax rates and things like that. It's messy, like you said. Max, what's the biggest surprise tax bill you guys have ever seen?
You know, we were actually talking about this one customer who, prior to utilizing us, unfortunately, they were renting in Osceola County. They have 8 properties. In 2023, they came to us in 2025, signed up for our services, and they recently just got a tax bill from Osceola County for assuming revenues. Now, mind you, they did not double check these revenues, Osceola County. They sent them a tax bill of $150,000, saying that they owed all of this. And by the way, they owe it in 2 weeks. So yeah, that was a pretty good one. What I always say is it's better to get ahead of it, reach out to them, get compliant before you list those properties. But yeah, we're helping her work through that situation, but definitely get ahead of it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I'd probably pass out if I opened that letter.
You and me both, Alexa.
Yeah. All right. If we get any other questions in the chat for Avalara on tax stuff, we'll pass it along to Max and his team. For now, check out all of their resources for sure. Thank you, Max. This was really helpful. I feel much more prepared to head off any major tax issues now. Hope everybody else does as well. All right, let me bring up my other friend, Paul Seago, who's going to talk about yet another patchwork, and that is all the other regulations besides taxes. So, Paul, take it away.
Hey Alexa, how's everyone doing today? Max, I am also a Floridian. I'm sitting in Seattle right this minute, but I live in Orlando, and so want to take a little bit of time, and I'm going to put a little bit of an exclamation point on some of your fantastic examples. But just a quick introduction. Paul Seago, I'm the Director of U.S. State and Local Government and Corporate Affairs for Expedia Group. Vrbo is our short-term rental brand. I am primarily in charge of Florida for all of our GA issues, but I also oversee our team spread across the country. And from that vantage point, I see a lot of short-term rental ordinances. I see a lot of tax legislation. And so just want to spend some time really just kind of walking you through this idea of how to get ready for the big game. We'll talk a little bit about what some of the local regulations are out there, some best practices, tips, and reminders for hosting, and then what's next. And so really want to spend just a few minutes, just again, Max touched on this a little bit, but I want to put a fine point on this. Look up your local regulations. Max talked about what goes on in some Florida cities. And if we could pull, Max, I'm not going to ask you this, but when you showed that map of Miami Beach, in Miami-Dade County, there are a ton of local jurisdictions, and it is sometimes hard to figure out if you were to look at that map and you drive just a little bit to the west, you might be in the city of Miami, you might be in the city of Miami Gardens, you might be in unincorporated Miami-Dade County, all of which have different short-term rental regulations, all of which require a different permit. You might find yourself in the suburbs of Boston or Kansas City or Los Angeles or one of the cities that's going to be a World Cup venue. And you might look at Los Angeles's regulations, but do you live in unincorporated LA County? Do you live in one of the other little jurisdictions there? Google those things, go find out what the regulations are in your town. And you may find that there are tons of different regulations. You may find specifically in a place like Hollywood, Florida, which is just out in Broward County, which is just north of Miami. But if folks are looking to go to the games in Miami, they might very well stay in Hollywood. Hollywood's application for your short-term rental ordinance has, I think it's 15 or 16 separate things you need to do, right? From a site plan to, ask your neighbors for permission. There are tons of things that are out there that even one-time renters need to do. And Max put a great line on this, and we want this to be an awesome experience for you if you're just thinking about dipping a toe into this, if you've been renting for a long time. But as you get into this for the World Cup, do this right so that you have a fantastic experience with all of this. I will add to that the tax regulations as well. Max did a much better job than I will ever do of going through those tax issues. But I will tell you, as he mentioned, look up what the platforms collect on your behalf, because as he pointed out, in some cases, Vrbo is collecting and remitting for you. In some cases, Airbnb is collecting and remitting for you. In some places, it's by state law. In some places, it's a voluntary collection agreement that we have agreed to step into that role for you. In some places, we're collecting the tax from the traveler, and we're going to send it to you as the owner. And we're going to send you a note that says, hey, this tax is due, and you need to remember to send it in. As he also pointed out, there is going to be a lot of scrutiny around the World Cup. There is going to be a ton of influx of visitors, and a ton of these cities have some deal in place with a system like Granicus or one of these other systems that will go and scrape the websites of Airbnb and Vrbo and Booking.com and all of the others and all the small ones to find short-term rental listings and make sure they've got the right permits, make sure they've got the right paying the right taxes. So please get on that. In terms of being a responsible host, there are so many great guides out there on what to do, but one of the best is Rent Responsibly. I say that not just because I can see Alexa in my screen, but Rent Responsibly has been a fantastic resource for vacation rental owners and managers across the country, and making sure that owners and managers are doing this in the right way. And so whether it's welcome packets for your guests, whether it's creating and posting those house rules that you're going to want to have when your guests come in, so they know what's acceptable behavior and what isn't. All of those things, find those from Rent Responsibly. Check in with your local hosting alliance. Those are also folks that are in this space and taking the extra step of being advocates for this industry to government and to others, but they are really excellent in sharing information and making sure that hosts have this information so that this all goes well. You get to the end and you're like, wow, this was a fantastic experience. The World Cup is over, made a bunch of money. This was really cool. I want to do this again. And you're thinking, okay, I could see myself doing this again. What would be the next event? There could be a graduation, right, at the local university. There could be right, some massive festival, right, the local mud dauber festival or the garlic festival or whatever it is that your town has, the Renaissance Fair, right, that brings people to town that would get someone to rent your place again. And you want to do this a little bit more often. As a government affairs person, I default to this sense of, great, we need you to advocate for this industry. We need you to work on the business as much as you work in the business. And when I say in the business, right, that is the getting the place cleaned, flipping it between your rentals. But working on the business means that you are part of advocating for this professional industry that is being more regulated all the time. And so be a voice for with your local elected officials. Be a voice for responsible hosting. Go meet your elected officials and let them hear your story of getting involved in this industry and for doing things the right way. There is almost no limit to the voices on the other side, right? NIMBYs that go to city council and county commission meetings and sit in the front with matching t-shirts about, right, not wanting short-term rentals in their neighborhoods. And if that's all city council or county commission hears from, that's the way they will go. And so, again, need you to step up in this industry and make your voice heard. So attend your city council meetings, attend county commission meetings, go meet your state legislators. And you might think, well, that seems like a lot. It is a lot, but the other side is out doing this. And so we need to do it as well. It's one thing for, right, the big companies to come in and say, hey, I'm from Verbo, we're based in Seattle, which is not right, this community, and we're here to advocate in favor of short-term rentals. And they're like, great, we don't care. It's a totally another thing for locals from their community to say, this is why I got into this industry. Let me tell you what we do here. Let me demonstrate to you that these are not crazy party houses and all the things that the NIMBYs are saying that it is. But they need to hear that from you. They'll hear it from us, but your voice matters more at that level. So take a little bit of time to work on the business as you work in the business. Yeah. If you've got any questions, I know there've been a couple in the chat. Happy to take those, send them to our government affairs alias, and just really thank you for taking the time to do this. Thank you for getting involved in this industry and wanting to be a host, and just appreciate your time and attention on the webinar.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. We mentioned this at the start of the event. There are going to be some regional events where other members of Paul's team are going to join and talk really specifically about the regulations in your area. Some places are doing temporary things. A lot of places are definitely stepping up enforcement. So we're going to get really down into the weeds on that in a couple weeks. But all of Paul's advice here is something that I would absolutely echo.
Yeah. Google your local town and just write City of Plantation, Florida, short-term rental ordinance, and you'll find it. And there's just so many. And again, in the suburbs of these communities that are hosting events will be a place that people are going to want to stay. They will stay, 20-ish minutes outside of the venue because there was just so, right, the geographic spread, people are going to stay in a lot of different places. And so go look up those regulations.
Yeah, and your HOA or your COA too.
For sure.
That's something we don't get into the weeds of, but man, it's just a whole other layer, underneath the city. Yeah, I'll echo what Paul was saying about getting involved in advocacy. I mean, whether you've been doing this for 14 years or since 1999, or you're doing this for the first time, this is a really amazing opportunity for all of our cities to see the value that short-term rentals bring to a location, whether or not, there's a surge event. And it can be done responsibly and in a way that is great for the community, great for all sorts of travelers, sports and otherwise. And it takes effort to keep that positive momentum going with your city council because they're constantly turning over. The World Cup's going to come and go, and they might forget. And so that ongoing work is critical. And there are many organizations that can help you. The two of us sitting here together are certainly two of them. Local organizations as well. So think about that. If you're going to continue hosting after the World Cup, your story matters. It's really important to keeping the business alive. I don't see any questions in the chat. So unless there's a last minute addition, oh, there is from Max. What is the most important legislation impacting short-term rentals you've seen recently? That's a good question, Max.
Yeah, I think it is about registration and the fines for listing without that proper registration, right? Initially, and I'll keep going back to the city of Miami Beach. When the city of Miami Beach first came out with the regulations, fines for renting without the proper permit were $20,000 per violation. Now those have been reduced, but again, as Max talked about, the tax bill, the unexpected tax bill from those folks in Osceola County. Don't get the unexpected fine for renting without the proper licensing. I will also point out, City of Miami Beach has a super aggressive code enforcement department, and they send them out in uniform that look a little bit like police officers and they have knocked on doors of places that, again, these companies like Granicus and others that scrape listings. They have sent people out in uniform that look a lot like cops and have evicted people staying in a short-term rental. They have evicted people on their honeymoons. They have evicted people in the middle of vacations, and that is not a great guest experience. And then, right, as a host, you're going to get that fine. And so please, you might have this thought like, they're not going to catch me. They're going to catch you. There's going to be a lot of scrutiny around events like the World Cup, in other places where, right, the Super Bowl comes to town, or the NCAA national championship game, or the Final Four. All of those events have a heightened amount of scrutiny to them, and so cities are going to really pay attention to this stuff. So take the time, do it right, and make this a wonderful experience.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Any other questions? Okay, if any more pop into the chat, we'll send them over to your team, Paul, and then I will also talk about those regional events where they can talk to members of your team here in a couple of weeks as well.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Okay, I'm going to take us out here with a segment on not taxes, not all the risks, the fun stuff. We've eaten all of our vegetables with all those important things we need to be doing. Now we're going to talk a little dessert, a little fun stuff. Let me share my screen here. Paul touched on this, and I'm going to echo it. The World Cup is it's not the only big event. It's not the only opportunity to benefit from things like sports tourism or just any other event-related tourism. And for host cities, you're hosting the World Cup for a reason, because your city is equipped for it. You've got the venues, you've got the space, you've got the transportation. And so if this is your first time or not, it doesn't matter. There are going to be more and more opportunities for attracting sports fans over the next few years for sure. And certainly, if you want to do this for decades to come, there will always be more of these. Quick background on myself before Rent Responsibly. I was in property management for a couple of different companies. I was the director of marketing. And so the stuff that we're going to talk about today is the type of stuff that I would really sink my teeth into in that role. finding data, finding trends and things that I could use to improve my marketing. I could use to improve the guest experience and get those guests coming back. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. The things we're going to talk about here are the demographics and the guest experience of the World Cup traveler, what they're spending, where they're spending it, and then sports tourism beyond the World Cup. And we'll loop all that together into how you can actually use these facts, figures, trends to build a game plan for yourself and for your property or properties. I'm paying attention to the clock. We might run over a minute or two. I'll do my best to be expeditious, but I will also stay on if anybody has any questions close to the end of this segment. So what I'm going to talk through are primarily stats from two different reports from GSIQ. It is a sports tourism specific analytics company. I won't bore you with the details of their studies, but if you want to go and read them and learn more, you will see these download buttons throughout my presentation. You can't click on them here in Zoom, but you'll get a copy of this and you will be able to click and download all the things that I'm talking about. Lindsay's also going to drop things in chat for you. So please go check out these reports. You will find more insights in there that might be applicable to you. We also have some data from our friends at Key Data. They are a wonderful data company for all sorts of short-term rental and accommodation data. Check out their blog, check out their website, and you can find a lot more resources there than we have time to cover today. First things first, it's going to sound very basic, but if you haven't done this yet, this is the homework assignment I would give you for today. And that is go get the most up-to-date match schedule for your city. You can download it from FIFA.com. If you want to see all the cities, I'm sure you can also find your specific city and the teams that are coming. When I pulled this a few days ago, a week ago, maybe, not all the teams had been slot yet. So this is probably updated even from the one you see on the screen here. Probably can't even read the one on the screen. Doesn't really matter. Download the latest version and get to know the teams that are coming. I'm going to give you some broad trends on international travelers, but then every single country has a different fandom. They travel differently. They're coming different distances. Their teams are playing at different times. Some may go farther. Some will definitely go farther than others. So just get to know that lay of the land for your city, who's coming, when they'll be there, and think about how far their team might go. Now, international travelers for the World Cup, these are coming from outside the country into the US. They are mostly between the ages of 25 and 44, which is a big spread. But if you think about it, this is a really targeted demographic of people, particularly those traveling with kids. 74% of them are traveling with kids. So these are definitely groups, 3, 4, 5 plus people. They need places like short-term rentals. They are also staying longer because they're making the trip all the way over here. They're not just going to come for a match and leave. They are exploring your destination. They're exploring drive-to areas. From there, maybe they're hitting multiple host cities, but they're going to be here for a while. And at the time of this study, 7% of everybody they surveyed were preferring vacation rentals over hotels or other accommodation types. And it seems like a small segment, but if you think about that group stay and that extended stay, that is the market for short-term rentals. These are the groups that need multiple rooms. They need a kitchen. They might want a yard or a pool or other things for this segment. When they're in town, they want to do a bunch of stuff around the city. They're not just sit in your property and twiddle their thumbs. Some of the most important things or most highly sought after things that they want to do are restaurants and bars, culture and sightseeing, relaxation, nightlife and music. And then if you download, I think it's the white paper, the infographic, I can't remember which, there's a bunch of other things as well. So as you're thinking about this and you're getting to know your international travelers, as you can imagine, they want vacation rentals, and you can provide a lot of really helpful information to help them build a great experience. And I'll talk about why that's important in a few minutes. Now, domestic travelers, those who live in the US and are traveling within the US, are seeing very, very similar trends, except for the length of stay. This is a really unique World Cup where there are 16 host cities between 3 countries. So everybody in North America has like multiple options within a short flight or within a road trip distance where they can go and experience a match or two. Their trips are shorter, with the exception of Boston and San Francisco. Those cities have really long average length of stays. Everybody else is more like the long weekend, maybe something a little less than a week in that range. And that matters. So if you've got multiple matches coming up in your city, you are probably seeing more turnover. You probably need more bookings to fill that time. And all of that is worth considering, again, as you are thinking about how to market your property or how you are communicating with your guests. And back to international travelers, it is probably no surprise to think about how coming overseas from anywhere for a World Cup is not a normal holiday. This is something that is very special. It is rare. It is high emotion. It is probably a once in a lifetime opportunity for many people. And it's very event led. That involves very expensive things, not just the flights, but accommodations and all sorts of things with premium pricing, the tickets, longer stays, multi-city travel, all sorts of things. We know that on average, these travelers are spending almost twice as much as they would on a normal summer vacation over to the US. We know too that it is very European led, especially the British. The UK might have 3 teams qualify. So especially if you've got European teams coming your way, especially British teams, you've got a group that is ready and willing to spend more, which is where we see a lot of that pricing lift coming from. Now, of course, there is more than just the World Cup. And across the board, sports tourism is on the rise. We know that 63% or people, the number who intend to travel for sports in the next few years is 63% higher than it has been the past few years. Most of the driver for this is professional sport, but people sometimes forget college sports and amateur sports like marathons are not that far behind pro sports. So as you're looking at your local event calendars or seeing what's around you, there are a lot more opportunities than just these like big, massive venue type arenas. Of course, there are barriers to this type of travel. The number one is that the destination is difficult to reach. People can't choose where an event is held. And so if they can't get to the destination, that's obviously, the number one barrier for them. But price sensitivity and concerns about quality aren't too far behind that. So if you've really jacked up your rates for the World Cup and you're seeing not as many bookings as you hoped, this might be why. There's all sorts of other expenses and things that come with sports travel. So people are sensitive to price. They might be willing to pay more, but not that much more. There's also concerns about quality. You're going sometimes to a new country or definitely to a new place. Vacation rentals don't have the same kind of recognizable brand like a Marriott. And so they aren't totally sure if what they see in a listing is what they're going to walk into in real life. So think about that as you are setting your pricing and setting your or updating your listings around sports events. But my favorite thing out of all of this is that sports tourists are some of the best for coming back to a location and referring other people. 4 in 5 will sometimes go back to a destination whether or not there is a sporting event there or the one that brought them there in the first place. And 82% recommend a visit to others. Now, that could be the destination, but if you do a really good job with their guest experience in your property, that can include your specific property. So my teammate Blythe is going to talk a lot more about reviews, referrals, repeat guests in her segment in the regional events, which I'll touch on later. So there is a lot more to unpack just on that item number 4 there. But for now, here's what all of this means for each of us. Whether you're brand new, whether you're not, whether you're renting your primary residence or you are managing for others, it doesn't matter. All of this information can be used in how you market your properties, how you operate, how you communicate. So let's look at pre-booking. If you are still trying to get your property or properties booked for that World Cup period, Some things to consider or check your listing for. Reassurances about safety and security. Again, people are coming to an unfamiliar area quite often, and they want to know that they're going to be safe and secure when they're in your place. Look at all applicable amenities and indicators of quality in your property. If you just tossed in a few amenities, if you threw a listing up, didn't talk at all about quality, this is a really big area of opportunity where include everything you possibly could, because chances are even something you might find as insignificant could be of appeal or of necessity to the type of guests who are coming for the World Cup and sports in general. Definitely talk about your proximity to local attractions, venues, events, all of those things. That doesn't necessarily mean your property has to be within a 5-minute walk to be in proximity. If you can talk about how close you are to a bus stop or a subway stop, or how close something is to drive to, that is all really valuable information. It's really helpful for those planning the trips. And if you can give them that confidence right in your listing, they're much more likely to book your property as opposed to somebody else's. Also include high quality photography and a lot of it. We have several resources on property photography, but the gist is if you're just throwing up a handful of iPhone photos, it's not going to do the trick in today's short-term rental world. Consider investing in a professional photographer who's going to stage the property, light it properly, and get you a bunch of nice photos that really show a guest what it's like to stay in your property. And then if you want to get extra advanced, consider a dynamic pricing tool. For those who are new and don't know what that is, these are tools like a company called Wheelhouse or Price Lab that will automatically adjust your rate to make it extremely competitive with what's happening in your market. You can do this by hand as well. Just keep an eye on the prices of similar properties around you. And if you're way too high, consider bringing your price down to make it more competitive. If you're way too low, you're leaving money on the table, consider increasing your rates. I do have an example listing that my friend Lindsay will drop into the chat. Oh, she just dropped it. I think it does a lot of these things really well. So take a look at that as an example for some inspiration. Now, pre-stay is your opportunity to really get these guests excited and building that trust with you as their host. So do things during this period like communicating important reminders and trip planning tips. For example, if your property can only accommodate one vehicle, make sure to let guests know that so that they don't show up with 4 and then have to deal with the headache of finding parking for 3 of them. Create and share a local travel guide. I'm assuming for most people, you are local to where your property is. That means you are a local expert. You are an ambassador for your community. You can recommend all your favorite places and put that into a guide and share that. You can do that with a tool like TouchStay or a bunch of management software has that built in. You can also just do it in a nicely formatted PDF. Finally, make sure your property is ready for guests and for summer. And when I say guests, if this is your first time, this is not the same as hosting your aunt from out of town. These people have invested probably a lot of money to come stay and are expecting a professional, hospitable experience. So we've got guides and templates for what it actually means to set up a property for a paying guest. And then it's also going to be the heat of summer. So that is not the time you want to find out the hard way that your AC is kaput. Do all of your preventative summer maintenance basically now as we're going into spring. Start getting things checked. Make sure your filters are replaced. Make sure everything's topped up on everything it needs. Again, we've got guides and templates on this, and this is the time to be doing that kind of work. Now, in stay, you want to support a great guest experience, but this is maybe one of the easier steps of the process because mostly what you need to be doing is just being responsive. When you are hosting, you are on call 24/7 when you've got guests in your properties. So just be available to answer their questions, address their needs, understand, especially if you've got international travelers in your property that they might have some unique needs or just need some additional help. And also watch out for all the red flags, especially the things that Humphrey was talking about earlier. Also in the links that Lindsay is sharing, there is a guide on where and how you can use security cameras. You can't have them everywhere, but there are places that they are allowed, and the places where you want to have them to catch a lot of the warning signs that Humphrey was saying. And then finally, if you're going to continue to host after the World Cup, this is a prime audience to bring back and get referrals from. So consider things like sharing a special offer with them to come and book again or to refer a friend. Ask for that 5-star review, especially if you're confident they were happy. Ask for that review. Do something like create a newsletter or some other way to stay engaged with this group of guests and stay top of mind for the next time they want to come to your city or they want to send somebody your way. We're going to talk a lot more about all of these things in the regional events that I've been mentioning. So April 14th, 15th, 16th, we've got local events for every host city. Find yours, sign up, and we're going to get way into the weeds on all these things, more templates, more guides, all sorts of things. But the reminder is that this isn't a one and done experience. There's a ton of other events probably coming to all of your host cities. LA, you guys have kind of a trifecta happening the next few years between the World Cup and then Super Bowl and then the Olympics. So LA, you guys are lucky over there. College sports, Paul mentioned March Madness. There's bowl games. There's all sorts of college sports. Pro amateur sports like marathons, Ironman, CrossFit, those types of things are big draws. And again, these are athletes. They're coming. They need kitchens. They are probably bringing a group or staying with teammates. Vacation rentals are perfect for these opportunities. I mentioned the Olympics and Paralympics. WrestleMania is another one. We're not going to debate whether that's a sport, but you better believe those fans are sports fans. And I can tell you the second the next location is announced, bookings spike overnight. If Dave Krause is still here, I think he had this happen to him when he was hosting. They are fans. They want to come see this event. So all of the things that we've been talking about apply. All right. Before I wrap up, there are a ton of resources out there available for you. We've talked a lot about the Game On resources, and there are more. We're not going to drop all of these links into the chat. You can screenshot this or just wait until you get the deck and you can actually click on all these. But every single city has an official FIFA site. They've got a destination marketing organization, and many of them have a short-term rental association. Highly recommend checking out all these things, especially your local association, because they are doing a ton of things also around hosting and the World Cup that are worth checking out. Lindsay also just dropped in the chat. We have local host readiness kits for every single city. They have checklists in there for a lot of stuff we've talked about today and a whole lot more. So in them, you'll be able to find things like some property preparation checklists, some guest communication templates. You can get your kit at the link that Lindsay dropped. And then here are those events that we've been talking about. So in a couple weeks, we have divided up all the cities into these regions. And in each of these events, for all of these cities, we're going to talk about local and regional travel trends, listing tips specific to your area, guest communication, getting those 5-star reviews, repeat guests, and referrals, the 3 R's. We're going to talk more about the local organizations, what they can do for you, what you can get from them, and more details on the local rules, because as we've talked about today, all that stuff is complex, not always easy to find. So register for your event. I hope to see you again there in a few weeks. But for now, before I wrap up, anybody have any questions about anything I talked about or anything any of our other speakers talked about? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So if you have questions later, email us and we will be sure to get back to you. If you have questions for any of the other partners, also email us and we will get your question to the right person to help you out. But for now, thank you everybody for attending. I hope this was really valuable. Please take the survey that was just dropped in the chat and let us know what you thought. If there's more that you want us to explore, tell us. And so we will bring it to the website. We will bring it to those regional events. And we hope to see you back there in a few weeks. Thank you, everybody.